sharing your insights into what's taking place in Ivory Coast. With that, viewers, we're shifting focus to what's transpiring in Sudan. Now, Sudan's army chief, Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, has confirmed that his forces have retreated from the Al-Fashir city after the RSF paramilitary group has taken control. The Sudanese army chief has stated that his army would still continue to fight until Sudan is freed from the RSF's control. Listen in.
يغادروا المدينة ويذهبوا إلى مكان آمن حتى يجنبوا بقية المواطنين وبقية المدينة الدمار. نحن عازمين على أن نقتص لكل شهدائنا، عازمين على أن نقتص لما حدث لأهلنا في الفاشر. الجرائم التي ارتكبت الآن في الفاشر وارتكبت قبل ذلك في كل بقاع السودان على مرأى ومسمع من العالم.
Now, the loss of the Al-Fashir city marks a major setback for the Sudanese military, as it was their final stronghold in Western Darfur region. Meanwhile, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has also reacted to the ongoing humanitarian crisis, describing the situation in Sudan as unbearable. He has further warned that increasing foreign interference is making it all the more difficult to achieve a ceasefire in the country. Listen in.
Because the level of suffering that we are witnessing in Sudan is unbearable, and it is clear that we have not only a Sudanese problem with an army and the rapid support forces fighting each other, we have more and more an external interference that undermines the possibility to a ceasefire and to a political solution of the problem.
Then, of course, we heard what exactly the UN Secretary General has had to say. There are concerns regarding the humanitarian crisis that we are witnessing, the genocide as well in Darfur. It's being carried out against the Fur, Masalit and Zaghawa ethnic groups. It's in fact led the International Criminal Court to indict several people for crimes against humanity, rape, forced transfer and torture. Meanwhile, joining us on the broadcast is Dr. Charles Sinkala. He is an international relations expert joining us from Johannesburg in South Africa. Thank you so much for taking our time and speaking to us on NewsX World. We've recently learned that the Sudanese army chief, Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, has confirmed that his forces have retreated from the Al-Fashir city, which was one of their final strongholds against the RSF. In your assessment, was this then a strategic withdrawal, because the Sudanese army claims that they've done so to protect civilians and ensure that further loss of life does not take place? Or is this truly a loss of a stronghold to the RSF that could have further repercussions down the line?
Thank you very much. I think it is not a loss of power or in their stronghold. I think it's about the negotiations, the peace accord that they signed a month ago, that indicated that they shall withdraw from the southern part of Sudan, which can give aid to and assistance to the people who are vulnerable into those regions. And I think they have actually consented to the peace accord that has been signed.
Indeed, and a quick follow-up to that, the Amnesty International has expressed concerns of atrocities by the RSF. We do know that with this withdrawal, now thousands of civilians are trapped in Al-Fashir. Humanitarian access, as is, was being restricted by the RSF. What sort of action should then the world now take in order to ensure that civilian casualties, that civilians who are trapped in the midst of this civil war do not, in fact, lose their lives anymore and do not face any more suffering?
I think civilians must be prioritized in terms of the escalation of military support. I think to the large extent, the recent study has indicated that the private and military security companies that are offering security within these regions actually are exacerbating to the suffering of the people. And I think if war can prioritize the well-being of the civilians and the casualties that is happening, we have the similar situation in Ukraine, as the invasion of Ukraine from Russia has continued. and as well as in many parts of the world because of the military escalation that is giving problems rather than solving the solution within that region. Yes, Sudan cannot be forgotten as the country has been split into two. There was only one Sudan some 30 years ago, but now we have South and North Sudan, which indicates that the fight and the differences continues.
Indeed, and we've also just heard what the UN Secretary General has had to say. He's warned against foreign interference into what's happening in Sudan. We've recently seen the Sudanese army chief in Egypt. He had held a meeting with Egyptian authorities over there. So what sort of foreign backers is Antonio Guterres referring to? Is it the UAE? Is it the Egypt? Is it the Wagner group? And what sort of role do they play in this conflict and shaping its outcome?
Well, you know, the third law of conflict, it indicates that every third party in every conflict is an unwanted visitor. That's why we have seen that the United Nations Security Council sit on the UNGA, on the United General Assembly, to indicate that external forces and international actors who are actually exacerbating in terms of war must stop in terms of dealing with the things. So now, I've just been disturbed.
Indeed, can you hear us? I'll get back to your point, but of course, coming back to what Antonio Guterres has been saying, he has stated that outside interference in Sudan is undermining the prospects for peace. These comments were made on the sidelines of the ASEAN summit in Malaysia. He has in fact emphasized that the international community must call on countries to stop supplying weapons to parties involved in the conflict itself. This is a crucial statement that has come out because the larger picture here is the forging sustainable peace. Even as the violence continues to escalate, people are trapped in a humanitarian crisis. The war is, of course, grinding on. There are pushes in multiple fronts, including diplomatically, in order to provide a fresh roadmap to end this conflict or not. But the statements and that are coming in, of course, lead to a question whether this can truly bring peace to a fractured nation. As I mentioned earlier, we've been seeing on the diplomatic front, the United States, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, United Arab Emirates have all come out to discuss. They have revealed a roadmap as well, but whether or not this will help the civilian population in Sudan as well, that of course is the larger question. The RSF and the atrocities it is committing in the region are the key concern as well. Meanwhile, viewers, we're shifting focus to what's taking place in Cameroon. In Cameroon, Paul Biya has been declared the winner of the country's election, securing an 8th term with 53.66% of the vote. At 92 years, Biya is now set to remain in power continuing a rule that began in 1982. Opposition leader Issa Chiroma Bakari, who had claimed victory based on his own tally, meanwhile rejected official results, calling the election a masquerade. Meanwhile, tensions have flared across Cameroon following the announcement. Security forces dispersed demonstrations in major cities including Douala, Yaoundé and Bafoussam after clashes between protesters and police left at least 4 people dead. Listen in to what some of the protesters have had to say.
On nous voit chaque année, on tue les élections, ils sont en train de tuer les élections. Nos Bissau, Chiroma, on dit Nos Bissau. Moi j'ai perdu mon temps pour aller voter par rapport à quoi? Alors je vous demande, pourquoi les gens perdent leur temps pour aller voter? Parce que je vote mon candidat, après il passe, on dit qu'il n'est pas passé.
With us on the broadcast is Dr. Charles Senkala, international relations expert. We, of course, there lost you in between. And we've now shifted our focus to what's taking place in Cameroon. We've just heard what some of the protesters on the ground have had to say. It's a record election for Paul Biya. He's 92 years old now. And in the meantime, his opposition candidate, Issa Chiroma Bakari, had earlier claimed victory and has now rejected these results, calling the election a mere masquerade. What, in your assessment, is currently the state of democracy in Cameroon?
Well, the state of democracy is not different from any other African nation, especially for those who regained their independence as early as the 1960s. We can't forget what happened when the African leaders regained their independence. And I think there was a celebration because of the political independence that they regained. And if you talk about the Democratic Republic of Congo, we also saw some assassinations in terms of the leaders that we got when Patrice Emery Lumumba was assassinated in 1960 and replaced by Mobutu Sese Seko Kokombendung Wazambanga. And all these are leaders who has been clinging on to power. But the question is Paul Biya old enough not to lead the country Cameroon at 92? If he's capable of doing it, there's no reason of him to be replaced. The challenge is African countries, they fight for political independence, which was attained already, instead of fighting for economical independence that can uplift the livelihood of the citizens.
Indeed. On the other hand, there are experts who argue that West and Central Africa have long witnessed a lot of military coups taking place, and you know, there's a lot of military autocracy that African nations, including in West and Central Africa at large, witness. Then is this a message that Biya is trying to send, that democracy is still alive, or does his consecutive victories, now the 8th term of him being in power, then question the legitimacy of the democratic exercise that is being carried out?
Well, democracy was franchised from the United States of America in the early 1935 and those years. And I think it has failed to work here in African politics because of the certain things that has happened in terms of organizing the people of the African continent to work towards the development of the nations. Yes, coup d'etats now, they are as frequent, like what they say, that as breakfast now, because breakfast was not as frequent as coup d'etats in the early 80s. But we can see that Madagascar as well had the coup d'etat when it was replaced by a military lieutenant colonel. And this shall continue because the people now are tired of this democratic governance system that does not give them any solution to their livelihood in terms of economic independence. If you talk about the West African region, and the South Sahel and the Maghreb and the North Africa, they are actually trying to militarize their governance instead of the normal conventional government, which is subjected to the bureaucratic systems of the world. You know, if you look at the development in these nations, you start to note that many bureaucratic systems impede the developments. For instance, if you look at local governments in most of these nations, for them just to do the road, they must find a solution to sit in the committee, and that committee must sit in the procurement committee, and from the procurement committee there must be finance committee. So these bureaucratic systems impediment development. But if you look at the militarization of nations, as we had in my country, Zambia, where we had a one-party state, at least we had some decency in terms of governance, where everybody to do one thing and everybody. For democracy, find that everybody.
All right, so there seems to be an issue with your connection. We will try to get that sorted. In the meantime, I'd like to thank you for taking our time. Of course, sharing your perspective with us on NewsX World. The larger question, of course, is the protests that we're witnessing in Cameroon, whether they would escalate further or not. With that, viewers, we're shifting focus to Mali. We're now learning that Mali's former Prime Minister, Moussa Mara, has been sentenced to 2 years in prison for a social media post criticizing the country's military rulers. His lawyer says that he was also fined 500,000 CFA, roughly $880. Mara is among the few public figures to openly challenge the Assimi Goïta's government, which earlier this year dissolved political parties and extended its rule by 5 years without elections. Amnesty International has condemned this particular verdict, calling it a part of a growing crackdown on dissent. The group says that journalists and activists have also faced arrests for criticizing the military authorities. Mali's government has not commented on this particular case as of now. Meanwhile, the military rulers are struggling to contain a renewed jihadist insurgency that has disrupted fuel supplies and forced schools to close. Shifting focus to news coming in from Kenya. Kenya's Civil Aviation Authority has confirmed that an aircraft carrying 12 people crashed in Gwale County, I beg your pardon. The flight was traveling from Diani to Kichwa Tempo, and government agencies are on the scene assessing the cause and impact of the accident. Local authorities have reported that the aircraft has been completely destroyed and confirm that there are no survivors. Investigators have not yet released any detailed information on the type of the aircraft, the occupants' identities, or the circumstances of the flight itself. Meanwhile, rescue and recovery operations are underway. The crash itself has sent shockwaves through Kenya's aviation community and could trigger a broader safety review into light aircraft operations in the coastal region in particular. With that, viewers, it's a wrap on the Africa Brief. More news and updates